It is time for us to move the mountain. And if Mohammed can't make it to the mountain can make it to Mount Rushmore and Cheallaigh. Good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. How are you guys?
How did you sleep? This is so much pressure for various people. Nathan said he didn't sleep a wink before he had the responsibility. How did you get on last night?
I swear to God, I have slept more before the leaving cert. The stress that it brought me, I have to say, in my own head, I came to 1, 2 and 3 very quickly after thinking it out reasonably. 4. I spent a long time thinking of that 4th one. And last night didn't really sleep. Saturday night stressed out, not helped by the constant barrage from people on Twitter saying you absolutely must have this person, that person, and WhatsApp messages from friends and colleagues and cousins and relatives and everyone who I've ever met in Galway who had an opinion on Galway, also giving me their opinion. All very valid, but it just all adds into the stress.
Tune out the noise. That's the only bit of advice that we have, is tune out the noise and go with your heart, Máire Treasa. The format of this is very straightforward. Máire Treasa is going to pick her 4. We're going to give Michael Lyster, who's our special guest today, the opportunity to remove one of yours, but also to tell us who would be on his version of the mountain. But ultimately, the choice of 3/4 of this at least is on you, Máire Treasa. So let's get your first couple before we hear from Michael Lyster about who he'll be putting on his. So you said the early ones were straightforward and easy enough for you.
Yeah, and I think, first of all, I think it's very important to say that we are very lucky in Galway that we have the best county ever in Ireland. And we also have a great variety of athletes, from male, female, athletics, team sports, everything, national, international. So I have a big long list of everyone who absolutely deserves to be on that Mount Rushmore, one way, shape or form. 4 pages, Jerk.
They're going to, the way the Oscars start the music when they're get off the stage. When you're on page 3, we'll be like, start the music.
Well, do you guys want the whole long list?
Not really. I'd like to hear who your first 2 are. Well,
okay,
maybe give us some people you left off who you thought might have been close enough.
I'll tell you who I left off. This is even worse, nearly. I left Eamon Deasy off. I left Enda Colleran and Sean Purcell off.
Right.
Yeah. I left Olive Lucknan off.
Right. Let's get into who you put on then. Give us your first 2.
Okay, my first 2. Ibrahim, Joe Connelly. And Iveradho, Joe Canning.
The 2 Joes.
The 2 Joes. Too many Joes. I mean, if you want to play hurling in Ireland and to a high level, especially in Galway, just have the initials J and C, you'll be grand. Okay,
so give us why you went for Joe Connelly.
Joe Connelly, because he's so much more than a hurler. I wasn't even born when he made that famous speech in 1980, and I know it word for word. And people who don't speak Irish in Galway and all over the country know that speech word for word. He was the icon, I think, for that era of the early 80s when there was no joy in the world, really, and people who just had that feeling of unbridled joy that you're able to stand up in Croke Park, release that feeling, that wave of positivity. And also, being from the west of Ireland was dismal. When you watch films like The Commitments and stuff, and they paint Dublin as a horrible place with no aspirations or anything to look forward to, magnify that by 100 if you were west of the Shannon, and even more so again if you were an Irish speaker west of the Shannon. And it surpassed more than hurling. It was showing that the West was awake, Galway was awake, we were worth talking about, and also because Galway were that team that promised so much and never ever delivered. And finally in 1980 they got over it. And he just, to this day, he can't walk down Shop Street without people wanting photos with him, including people who weren't even alive, like I said, when this happened. People who might not know much at all about hurling, they all know Joe Connelly. And I think they were when I was putting together my kind of criteria, what you needed to have to qualify for this was that you gave people a feeling of Galwayness, that you represented Galway, that we were proud of you, you were one of us. And it wasn't so much about the winning. Just because you won a lot of things does not mean that you're a wonderful athlete, if you know what I mean. It's being an athlete is so much more than that. It's personality, and he had it in spades.
Okay, I can understand that there's an iconic moment. The on the field stuff is important, and obviously he was great at that, but there's actually something much more beyond that.
Yeah. And he's still so active. He's involved in the Irish language. He's involved with the Galway Hospice. He's always talking. You'll always hear him on Galway Bay FM about various fundraisers and charities. And he's very vocal now about, for the health and well-being, physical health and well-being of men of a certain age. There's not many people doing that. And he's always been, he takes anything by the mantle and he goes off and he does it. It's always I feel, for the good of Castlegar, for the good of hurling, for the good of Gaeilge, for the good of Galway. And I just think that should be celebrated.
Okay, so you've got Joe Connelly and Joe Canning. Talk to us about Joe Canning. Why is Joe Canning still active, of course, still has the opportunity to embellish his own legacy, and I'm sure he will over the next couple of years, hopefully. But why is he on your Mount Rushmore?
I thought about this and I decided I wasn't going to go down the Shane Hannon route of not giving somebody their place just because they're still playing. I know perhaps Monaghan people might have felt Conor McManus should have been there, but at the same time, it was a very valid Monaghan Mount Rushmore. I don't think anybody could argue with it. However, I think Joe Canning is today's hurler. People who don't know hurling, be you from Galway or not, all over the country, and we all know it's very difficult to recognise hurlers now because all have to wear those helmets. You don't have to have any interest in GAA to know who he is. And also, he is a magnificent hurler, to the point where nearly it goes against him. Like, if he doesn't score 212 in a game, people are complaining Joe Canning did nothing. And let's not forget, and I don't want to sound like sour grapes here, but like in the All-Ireland final in 2018 when they were playing Limerick, Limerick won the final, they won it fair and square. But Joe Canning, despite being coming back from injury and nearly being half crippled by the end of it, nearly snuck Galway back into it. That was a one-man band for that second half. It was all Joe Canning, and he does it all the time. He works hard on the ball, off the ball. And we saw last year as well, when he wasn't there at the championship, Galway fell apart. They had no leadership on the field without Joe. He is more than a great hurler. He's just... When Joe Canning's playing, Galway people breathe a sigh of relief. And he just comes across as a very nice person. He doesn't particularly court the limelight. He can't help the limelight. When you're that wonderful, it's going to come upon you. And I remember as well, actually, in 2017, when they won the All-Ireland final, when people were going around celebrating, he kind of took time aside and he stood with Tony Keating's kids. And I just thought, there's a guy who understands Galway, and he understands, it's more about hurling. It's about community. It's about social connections. It's about family. And thankfully and hopefully he'll still be around for a few more years to come.
Why do you think Joe Canning has reached that level of being a hurling icon so quickly, Máire Treasa? Is it because he was so good underage? Is it as simple as that he burst onto the scene so quickly?
I think that's definitely part of it. I think it's also because he's involved with Portumna, which is obviously another very famous and high-achieving hurling club, which also he comes from that long lineage of Cannings as well. So he had that kind of stuff already where people were going, oh, look at this new gentleman coming up through the ranks. We used to hear about him. I remember growing up in County Galway throughout my teens and early 20s, you'd hear about Joe Canning. And don't forget, I'm from football country. And even we knew who he was. To me, that's always a good sign. But I think because he has, when you hear about wristy hurling and he has the flair and he has the magic, like the flicks he's managed to do, everyone will always remember at that point he scored against Tipperary in the dying seconds in the All-Ireland semi-final in 2017 on the turn. After fluffing one just a few seconds beforehand, didn't matter, he's able to pull it out of his head. You're always guaranteed that Joe will create magic. And nearly, like I said, what goes against Joe is that he creates so much magic that sometimes I just think we don't appreciate it. And I just think sometimes legends can still be playing and you can still say, you know what, you are a legend.
I think you've confirmed for us this morning, certainly in your mind and in the minds of a lot of people, that Galway is primarily now a hurling county, not a football county, because you've gone for two hurlers. You've gone for Joe Connelly and Joe Canning. They're your first two, Máire Treasa, and I agree with that. Let's bring Michael Lyster in at this point for his judgment on your two hurlers. Michael, I think, good morning to you first off. How are you?
I am very well, and I'm sitting here listening with great interest to what Máire Treasa is saying. The other thing about it is she's gone for two hurlers, but at least there's a relief in this, because I was expecting her to go for four people from Carrow or something like that. So, we're in a close situation at the moment.
We're heading in the right direction. So I think there's consensus on Joe Canning. Is that right? Is Joe Canning on your Mount Rushmore?
I am in the happy position in contributing to this, in the sense that I can sit in judgment. Now, Máire Treasa has to make the picks, and she has to make her argument for her picks, obviously, as she's doing, where I can just sit here nodding my head and making judgment calls about it. And I already have one or two judgment calls in my head at this stage, given what she's already said. But I will hold my cards close to my chest until I hear her other two, and then we'll come in swinging.
Okay. This is good. Okay.
Oh dear.
Right. Who else have you got for us, Máire Treasa? He must have a footballer, surely. There's one footballer in the history of Galway who deserves a place on Mount Rushmore. Who is it?
Absolutely, and he is coming in now in not so much third position, but number 3 in the Mount Rushmore, and that is And again, this is very difficult. I would like to point out that I was getting in touch with Tommy Rooney over the weekend asking, for the love of God, Tommy, can I not just, give a team, give them a whole part of Mount Rushmore? And he was like, no, if I had my way, I would have done Galway 1980, Galway 98. But no, not allowed apparently. So to try and find the one footballer who I think would epitomise everything that is great about Galway football throughout the years, and you've probably mentioned loads of legends, and I know you're thinking, play the music, MT. The number 3 is Padraic Joyce. I should put my collar up for this, shouldn't I? Like
why is Joyce the example from the team that won the 2 All-Irelands? Why is it him that stands above all the others on that team?
That is a good question, because you could argue, why not Kevin Welsh, who actually took on the Galway job and not many people wanted it. He was also a Galway legend in his own way. And I decided to go with back to my original thing, which was feeling, what somebody epitomises, and a bit of panache and a bit of style. Padraic Joyce had style, and he still does. It's not that long ago, I remember being in Pearse Stadium when Lyster Maire were playing Cheallaigh actually, and Padraic was at the sunset of his career at this point. And during the first half, he kept Cheallaigh in the game because Lyster Maire couldn't handle him. And Lyster Maire only ended up winning the game because they put 3 of their players on him for the whole second half. And at this stage, I presume, a little bit of pace had been lost because he was in his early 40s at this point. Do you know what I mean? But back in the day, I remember 1998, I was a teenager, I was 13, 14 years old. This Galway team burst out in front of us. And we had the likes of Michael Donnellan, Padraic Joyce, Jaff Allen, who is there. He's always on my desk. We had all these, Tomas Manning, these young men with a bit of style about them, a bit of panache and a bit of personality. And I think maybe this is part of the reason why some of the more recent day hurlers and footballers, when I sent out, tweets, Instagrams asking people who would you like and why, I thought my own thoughts. And they're so media control now, we don't know who they are. Whereas from 1998, thanks to A Year Till Sunday, because they went around every parish in the county, we met these players, we grew to love them, we felt like they're one of our own. And he was just a wonder. He still is a wonderful footballer. And the fact we could see that in Galway when he took the Galway senior team on board there a few months ago, there was this collective, oh yeah, PJ's come home. And he's more than football. Again, when you think of Galway, you think of Padraic Joyce. So that was why I put him in as the Gaelic football representative, if that makes sense.
And it was 2-1 hurling to football, because you're only going to have one footballer, am I right?
Perhaps. Could be a female footballer.
Okay, sorry. But from the Galway football team that won in the 90s and 90s, yes, and from the great Galway team from before that period, he's the sole representative. Michael, yes, is the 2-1 ratio hurling to football fair in terms of what Galway's Mount Rushmore should have, in your view?
Again, Ger, I'm holding my cards. I am not going to throw them on the table just yet. Now, I've got my own selection, so I might have to jump in at the end of this, right? But the one thing about Padraic Joyce is he's a clubmate of my own, Cheallaigh. I actually remember that match that Máire Treasa was talking about against Livermore a little while back, where he actually just was taken out of retirement, if you like, more or less, to come back and keep Cheallaigh in the race. But I'm not sure, is she going to go for another footballer here? She's kind of hedging her bets a little bit about it. I do note, Máire Treasa, there's 4 male participants here, and we don't have a female Galway person yet. So I'm waiting for your next shot.
Who have you got first?
Well, this is the one I struggled most with. And actually, a serious point of this, there was a few gentlemen who decided to get in touch with me over the Twitter machine over the weekend saying, because of 2020, you have to have a female in there, not because she deserves it. And one in particular who was very derogatory about a female Galway hurler who has 2 All-Irelands under her belt and a host of All-Stars. Apparently, she wasn't good enough either. And this is not women's fault that we don't know who they are, because until TG4 began broadcasting ladies football, until the last few years, Camogie began to, I suppose, knock off the shackles, so to speak, and be allowed to actually hurl. We didn't know who a lot of these women were. That's not their fault. That's not to say they're not wonderful representatives of Galway. And this is the one I really struggled with, because I was thinking the people I want to select, I want them to be representative of young and old, male, female, city, county, Connemara person, North Galway, East Galway, South Galway, that people will go, I'm not sure I put them in that order, but fair enough, I can see why they're there. So I struggled back and forth, and I was I think what eventually made the decision for me for this, the fourth position, was over the weekend I was researching, going through back and forth, talking to people and watching TV. And again, it comes back to the feeling, and the feeling this person brings up in you and the memories they conjure into you inside. And again, this is where I say, not women's fault that they haven't been given that platform to do so. They were well able to do it. We saw it there last September, great day in Croke Park. So will I give you maybe my short list for fourth position, then tell you which one I came with in the end?
Go for it.
Okay. Christy O'Connor Jr., Annette Clark, Treasa Maire, and John Muldoon.
Okay, so that's...
And yeah, all were very worthy. I don't think you could argue with either of them.
Who'd you go for?
And I struggled. And eventually, I think what put me over the edge was, you could say this is craftiness on the behalf of the rugby community. TG Cahir re-showed the Pro 14 final against Leinster there a few years ago, and the outpouring of emotion, and especially for John Muldoon after he finally reached the pinnacle after, working so hard for so many years. So Ivra Cahir on Galway's Mount Rushmore, John Muldoon.
So just to recap, Joe Connelly, Joe Canning, Padraic Joyce and John Muldoon makes it for you. So it's rugby, 1 football and 2 hurling.
Yes.
And Annette Carney and Treasa Maire didn't make it.
Treasa Maire and Annette Clark did not make it, no. But I struggled with that. That's what made me toss and turn.
Okay. And Christy O'Connor didn't make it?
No.
Okay.
Again, it was the fourth one that really made me work mentally. And I know there's going to be people around the country go, no, what's she doing? And there'll be people who will agree with me and people who won't. And at the end of the day, it's just sport. It's the most important thing in the world and the least important thing in the world.
No, it's like that.
Yeah. Right. Michael, you've got to sit in judgment. Now is the time to come down from Mount Sinai and deliver the tablets. What is etched in stone for you?
Máire, Treasa, as the saying goes, sport is the most important thing of the least important things in life. So that's why we're enjoying this. Here's the thing about it. The 4 people that Máire Treasa has picked there are all worthy contenders. I'm not going to look at the list here and say I'm taking him out because he's not worthy enough. They're all deserve to be there. But it's like picking any team. You have 15 places on the GEA team. It's like when I was picking as a member of the All-Stars committee, and people would say to you afterwards, how in the name of God could you have left off so-and-so, and this kind of approach? And I'd say, okay, you want to put him in. Who are you taking off the team? That's the bottom line. But guess what? I am Máire Treasa going to take somebody off the team. I was a little bit disappointed that you ruled out, and he's not my selection, by the way, Chick Deasy very early on in this conversation. Eamon Deasy was a great soccer player in Galway, played for Aston Villa, won a European Cup medal with them, or at least played in that particular team, won what is now the Premier League with them. And I was just trying to think the other day, I have a funny feeling that I actually played against Chick Deasy back in the day, back in the 70s. Because when I was playing soccer in Galway, I know I played against Galway Rovers a couple of times, and I think Chick might have been playing. But anyway, he is not my selection. Sean Purcell is another one, Máire, that you gave an early yellow card to. Sean Purcell, and again, I hesitate to pick a Sean Purcell over a Padraic Joyce or everything, because I remember Padraic when he was a young lad going to national school in Barnajarrog, and he is the legend that Máire said he was and all that kind of thing. But the thing about Sean Purcell is this: if you ask anybody in Galway who represents Galway football for you, I think they will probably say, maybe those of an older generation, Sean Purcell would have to be in there. The team of the century in 1984, Máire Treasa. Sean Purcell was on that team, and not only was he on that team, he got more votes than the other 14 combined. What? So that, I think, is a measure of his status in Galway football. Won in All-Ireland. Padraic Joyce won 2. Sean Purcell won in 56. He won a National League medal. He won Railway Cup medals, as they were at the time. He captained Connacht to one of those. And of course, he won 10 county championships with Tuam Stars during that period of time. So what a footballer Sean Purcell was. And I knew Sean personally as well from my days in Tuam. But they're not my selection. Another man that you mentioned there, and I'm going to put this guy in and take out one of your four. Person I'm taking out is John Mulholland. Not because I don't like John, not because he's not a great rugby player, but I feel in that selection, Christy O'Connor Jr. simply has to be in there. I mean, it's not all about Gaelic games, and it's not all about rugby or the major sports. This man was a legend in golf. Not only because of his achievement back in 1989 in the Ryder Cup and that famous shot against Fred Couples that secured the Ryder Cup for Europe in that particular time. Christy was a winner outside of that, even in his later life, even when he left the tour and went on the seniors tour. He won $1 million on the seniors tour in the United States during that period of time, and was just a fabulous guy. I mean, you said yourself, Máire Treasa, a few minutes ago, it's not just about your achievements on the sports field, but it's what you actually represent. You spoke about, and rightly so, about Joe Connelly. That speech that he made and all that he represented for Galway. Christy O'Connor Jr. represented all of those things in spades as well. So if I'm going to cast my card on this one, John comes out, Christy O'Connor Jr. goes in.
That's fair enough, and you are totally entitled to do that. Can I ask you a little bit more about Sean Purcell? Because I mean, I'm interested in kind of different generations have different representatives for their teams, and obviously for MT growing up and going to Croker for those big games, I can see how Padraic Joyce with his "give me the ball," I'm gonna carry this team over the line no matter what needs to happen. What kind of a footballer was Sean Purcell? Like, what was it that so inspired everybody to give him so many votes for the team of the century?
Sean Purcell, and I suppose this again, Ger, is true of any team sport. And we talked about Joe Canning, Joe Connelly, etc. Let's be realistic here. No team is a one-man band, and it's about the people that are around you. And he played, Sean, in a very good Galway team in the 50s. And of course, the other member of that team was the other Chew man, Frank Stockwell. And the two of them together on the field were known as the Terrible Twins. Sean Purcell was a centre-half forward. He was big and he was tough and he was physical. And he did a lot of the donkey work that allowed Frank Stockwell to nip in because he was a smaller, wiry forward. And Purcell did a lot of the heavy lifting to create the space for people like Frank Stockwell around him. Now, that's it. Again, I go back. This is in no way taken away from Padraic Joyce, who was equally as good a footballer. But Purcell in that period of time was just the epitome of that Galway period. And from that success of 1956 with that Galway team when they beat Cork in the All-Ireland final, Padraic Harrington's father, I think, was on that Cork team as far as I remember. But that then paved the way for the great Galway team of the 60s, which drew on that. You know the way a winning team creates inspiration for those that come after it. And of course the Galway team of the 60s won that famous 3 in a row. So Sean Purcell was at the fulcrum of all of that. And then Sean afterwards, when he finished his playing days, was very, very much involved in Galway football from a county board level and so on. And he was one of those guys that just was held in awe around Galway and in particular around the Tuam area. And I would have to say, for me, Sean, but I wouldn't argue against P. Joyce.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. It is completely a subjective thing, and that's why this does engender such strong emotion from people. There's one last pitch from a Galway-connected person here, and Johnny Ward has also donned his Galway jersey to give us his last pitch for somebody to be included on Mount Rushmore. Have a look at this.
Plenty of candidates for the Galway nod for sure. I would say in hurling it'll be a toss-up between Joe Cooney, Ollie Canning and Joe Canning, and that'll be a tough one. Soccer, probably Eamon Deasy was the main man. He was absolutely iconic figure for Galway United and Aston Villa before that, played for nothing. Eric Elwood, what a rugby player he was. Sean O'Manion's achievements in boxing, absolutely astonishing. Great backstory as well. But I'm going to select one from Gaelic football. You could go quite recent in the form of Michael Donner, the present manager, Padraic Joyce, who were real heroes of mine when I grew up. Before that, then you go back to the likes of Sean Purcell. But it's actually Matty McDonagh who gets the nod for me. I'm a little bit biased here because Matty was from my local club and obviously a truly heroic figure. He won the All-Ireland at 19 years of age, playing midfield in 1956. Galway hadn't won it before that since 38, and Matty was playing midfield at 19. I think that's a huge achievement. He was basically a mainstay for the Galway team thereafter. He's the only Connacht man to win 4 All-Ireland medals, won 10 Connacht medals for Galway, 64, 65, 66 were his other 3, and scored the only Galway goal in those 3 finals hands, a fine left-footed strike. Galway wouldn't win the All-Ireland again until 1998. I think I was the last man to interview Matty before he passed away, and he was taken far too young, really, but a true legend, and his legacy lives on.
Okay, so slightly left field from Johnny Ward there. Máire Treasa, there's a bunch of other names.
Matty was on my list.
Was he? Okay.
He was.
There were a bunch of other names that have been mentioned there. So he's obviously one of them. Eric Elwood, was he in contention for your rugby slot?
He was. But I just felt John Muldoon just more so. There's no reason. Sometimes there's no reason. It's just a feeling.
You took Olive Loughnane out of this in the first part of the conversation. She must have been very close to it though, right? She
was. And literally it came down to, again, like I know you guys were saying last week, really helps to have a selection criteria. And also she was born in Cork, which made it a bit easier.
Máire Treasa, can I ask one question? I'd be keen to get Michael when he's back on the line as well, because I'm not sure if Ger's going to ask it or not, because this is basically his opinion. Has Galway underachieved as a sporting county?
Oh.
It's not me, it's Ger who made this point earlier on. I think
no,
he actually.
I don't think they have, because you can argue, should they have done more with the great footballers they had and the great hurlers they had? But the difference is, Galway, I think, has done what is exactly right when it comes to sport, which is opening up all sport to all people. So if you're from Kerry, for argument's sake, if you're not good at football, I'm raising an eyebrow because it's all you do. If you're not from Mayo, if you're from Mayo, you know what I mean? And you're not the top of your game when it comes to football, not doing the best you can do, I'm raising an eyebrow because it's all you do. Galway has, last year, for example, we could easily, if we had a championship this year, if it shows up or not, we could have Galway football, Galway hurling, Galway ladies, Galway camogie, all in the shake-up for a final. Plus a lot of other sports. I had a handballer in here. I had a lot of boxing involved as well. Athletics, Paul Hessian, we didn't mention him. He was also in the mix as well. So I wouldn't say they've underachieved. I would say what at most they could. You could say that perhaps the professional administration of things perhaps wasn't where it could be. But when it comes to athleticism and athletes and stuff like that, I think part of the reason why you could say Galway's finesse has been diluted by the diversity of sports is how I'd put it.
Michael Lyster is back with us, I think. Michael, that is a question. So I'm looking at the roll of honour for the hurling team and the football team. I think I'm right in saying that the hurlers have won 5 All-Irelands and the footballers have won 9. Does that sound right?
That's correct. I'm back with you. I get a suspicion that I was taken out of the game here after I dropped John Muldoon off Máire Treasa's original selection, because interestingly, suddenly I was cut off in midstream. I'm suspecting Máire Treasa has friends in high places in the tech business.
It's that rugby crowd.
In terms of Galway and the question that you're asking Máire Treasa there about underachieving, no, not at all. Quite the opposite in actual fact. One of the things about Galway as a county is you've produced famous footballers, famous hurlers, famous rugby players. Another guy that didn't get a mention here in any of this, Barry McGann from Bunabay. A very, very well-known rugby player back in his day and played for Ireland, of course, very successfully and so on. So there's a whole list that you can go on with.
And Kieran Fitzgerald.
And Kieran Fitzgerald, exactly. Kieran, where's your pride, everybody? And of course, in horse racing as well, there have been well-known trainers from Galway, etc. So you can actually keep going through the list. And it's because Galway is so diverse in terms of the popularity of Gaelic games, of course, of soccer, of rugby. I mean, we mentioned Chick Deasy earlier on. He was a man who played for Aston Villa at a time when Aston Villa were actually in Europe as one of the big teams in Europe at that particular time. So, no, I think Galway people can feel fairly proud of themselves. Now, look,
you mentioned horse racing there, actually, Michael. I had Graham Lee on the list there as well, and I had Bobby Joe. He has a statue in Montbellew.
That's exactly my point. Anytime that I've driven down from Dublin, down to the west of Ireland, down towards Barnagorg and down to Tuam, I pass Bobby Joe in the middle of Montbellew there.
Can I ask you a little bit though about the hurling, and because 5 hurling All-Irelands, 9 football, and yet there's 2 hurlers and 1 footballer. I think on both your lists, I think, Michael, if we'd given you this task of picking 4, it sounds like you would have had Sean Purcell on it. It does sound like you would have had Joe Canning on it. Would you have had Joe Connelly?
I would have actually had
John Connelly.
Ooh.
And I can see why Joe was one of Máire Treasa's picks in that, because of the things we've mentioned already, that famous speech and all the rest of it, and as captain of that team, what that meant to Galway people, which was just extraordinary after such a length of time without winning an All-Ireland to suddenly come good, and had been threatening to come good for a couple of years before that. Remember, when they won in 1980, they had lost the All-Ireland final the year before to Kilkenny. The reason that John would be there in my selection is John was there with Galway hurling back in the 60s, and he was soldiering on that team when there wasn't much to achieve for Galway, when they were struggling before the Cyril Farrer era came in and started to put shape on Galway hurling, and through all that period of time. John Connelly was one of those guys who would have been known as a great hurler in a team that wasn't known as a great team. And he was fortunate, and a little bit like Joe Canning, in actual fact, from this point of view. John Connelly was fortunate in the sense that he was still around in his latter days in hurling when Galway won that 1980 All-Ireland. So he did get his All-Ireland medal. And for a while there, up to 2017, we thought Joe Canning was going to end his career without an All-Ireland medal. And because Joe also, for the last couple of years, has been struggling with injuries, and some of them serious injuries, ligament damage and so on. But the two of them actually did get over the line in their own respective times. So for me, John Connelly would have to be up there in the bracket.
I think it's probably important to say as well, not to get too socio-economical and political about these kind of things, but when people say sure Galway only won X amount of All-Ireland and X amount of football, I think people forget that while it is a large county and it has a city in it, it's kind of diverse. It's kind of three sets of different types of people. You've got Connemara, you've got the city, and you've got the rest. And a lot of those people had to emigrate over generations after generations after generations, which Joe Connelly actually mentioned in the speech there in 1980. And as a result, I think maybe if less people had to leave that county over the years, and especially the Irish-speaking areas, like there's no land there. There was no way to live back there. It's very, very hard to this day, it's very, very hard to live in parts of County Galway. So I think when people say that Galway might have underachieved, as Michael said, I think no, they've actually overachieved when you consider the variety of sports and how hard life was west of the Shannon. I think anyone on the Western Seaboard would probably agree with that as well.
I think, Ger, just to pick up on what Máire Treasa is saying there, I totally agree with her on that point. Because for me, like down through the years, being from Galway, I find sometimes going west of Galway City, going out towards Connemara, out towards Máire Treasa's part of the world out there, I feel like I'm in a different county sometimes. And I remember actually being over in Ballyconnelly in 2017 when the week leading up to the All-Ireland hurling final with Galway were in it. And it might as well have been Roscommon that were in the hurling final, because people out that neck of the woods, it'll be more football than anything else, and really wouldn't know too much about the hurlers, I think. Would you agree, Máire Treasa?
Yeah, I think that's definitely changing. It was definitely the way I remember, like growing up. I have no memory, obviously, of the 80s whatsoever. I remember growing up in the 90s and stuff like that, and Galway hurling getting to semi-finals and finals, and watching it, but people not really getting excited until the football began to happen. But I think maybe due to maybe people having a bit more money, a bit more assimilation, which sounds like a silly word, but like from the late 90s onwards, Connemara people started going to college. We started meeting people from exotic places like Mount Bellew and Killererin and Portumna. and you began to get interested in, like we were watching Fitzgibbon, Sigerson, and then you kind of, that rode you along with it. And with the rise of seeing more of it on TV and road access, and actually everyone having their own cars for once, like it would have been unheard of. If you think about it, like if you're from Ballinasloe and you're playing, say, junior football with Ballinasloe or intermediate or senior football, and you're drawn in the draw against Clifton, it could be a 2.5, 3 hour drive in the height of summer to get back to Clifton to play that game. You'd be in Dublin sooner. And I think people forget the vast size of that county and how difficult it is then to create connections. And I think, better infrastructure, better media, better contact between people, more assimilation has only helped that. And I think, but still, I do maintain you will find more football people at hurling than hurling people at football. And probably because hurling is probably a better game to watch.
Okay, so we're nearly getting to the point where we know who's going to be on Galway's Mount Rushmore. I think Joe Connelly, Joe Canning, Padraic Joyce, and Christy O'Connor Jr. Tell us a little bit more, because I have a vague recollection of the Galway Bay Hotel opening up, and he had designed the golf course there, and just kind of the sense of him being a proper international, I don't want to say rock star, but there was an element of like glamour to Christy O'Connor Jr. that there wasn't that much of in the 90s in Ireland, let's face it. Am I right about that, Michael?
There's absolutely no question about that, and that was the part about Christy O'Connor. Apart from being a great golfer, he had that aura about him, and he had that charisma. Christy was a fella who loved to sing a song, and he loved social company. He loved enjoying your company as well. I remember on one occasion having a couple of pints with Christy in Dublin, and that evening he says to me as we're drinking away, he says, "Come on, drink up your pint." He says, "We're heading to Cork." And I said, "We're doing what?" He says, I have to look at a golf course down there and help him with the design of a golf course. He says, I'm flying down in a few minutes' time. Come on, drink up. I said, "Christy, hang on a second. Oh, I'm not going to Cork. I told Anne to be home for the dinner in about an hour's time." He says, "Not only you can bring her from Cork, he can tell you to be home tomorrow." And he was that kind of character. He just loved a bit of mischief and would have got, and I know I would have had a great time with him had I actually been silly enough to get in the helicopter and go to Cork. I probably might as well have stayed there, because I don't think I'd like to be ringing Anne Lester saying, "Sorry about this. Might be a bit late for the dinner. Mightn't be there until tomorrow." You know, but Christy had that aura about him. He was a great man for company and for making people feel at ease in his company, which is also important, I have to say, for sports people or for anybody.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Christy O'Connor Jr. is on your Mount Rushmore, Máire Treasa?
I couldn't argue against it. Like, it's a bit like saying who's more worthy, him or John Muldoon. That's a ridiculous question with no answer. But I mean, who am I to argue against the great Michael Lyster, who some people would argue should be on Mount Rushmore himself? So, you know what I mean? I'm just, while I was listening to him there and he was saying, you know, personality, this, that and the other, and there's still so many people we didn't even mention. Like, you could say that what he's just said about Christy O'Connor Jr., you could have said the exact same thing about Joe McDonough.
No, and look, Joe had a huge role to play.
Through the years, there was a couple of times I think people would have liked to have seen me under a few rocks, whatever about up and one.
Michael, Máire Treasa, great stuff. One last question. Where is it? Where is Mount Rushmore in Galway? What's the location?
Oh, the location is out in the Mom Valley.
Fair enough.
I'm putting it out there. You have to go past Peacocks and Mount Cross, which actually, if people of a certain vintage and location in County Galway be familiar, they'd know it. It's at a crossroad in between Clifton, the road up to Clonbur, the road to Carrow, the road to Uachtarard, and they used to have discos there in the Starlight Ballroom the year I did my Leaving Cert, and you'd go there and you'd meet exotic people from places from far away like Clonbur, and sometimes buses used to even come from Westport. The point is, if you put a Mount Rushmore in the Mon Valley, everyone from County Mayo all the way over to Portumna can come for the drive and enjoy the beautiful, glorious views of the wild Atlantic Way, and also soak in some legends.
A good day out.
Would you believe, Máire Treasa, I did DJ in Peacocks and Mount Cross many years ago.
Oh wow! If the walls of that place could talk, the stories we'd hear about both of you.
Oh Jesus, no!
Michael Lyster, Máire Treasa,
no.
Thanks a million for joining us this morning, for putting their head above the parapet. It's Joe Connelly, Joe Canning, Padraic Joyce, and Christy O'Connor Jr. There is your Mount Rushmore Galway.